As a child, you held this in your bare hands. A broken thermometer, silver balls on the floor, and you, 7 years old, squatting, chasing them with your finger across the linoleum. Merge the little ones into one big one. Mom can't see it. You're having fun. And now a fact. You played with the only metal on Earth that has killed more people than arsenic and cyanide combined. With a substance that drove emperors mad, destroyed a Japanese city, and right now, as you listen to this, is rising the food chain of the world's oceans to your plate. An element born not in a star, but in the collision of two dead stars, where a teaspoon of the substance weighs as much as Everest. An element that is liquid not because it wants to be, but because Einstein was right. This is Mercury, and you know much less about it than you think. Right now, a thought experiment. Take an ordinary cast iron bathtub. It's heavy. Now fill it not with water, but with a silvery liquid that looks like someone melted a mirror. The bathtub is standard, about 200 liters. But this liquid doesn't weigh 200 kilograms like water. It weighs 2,720 kilograms, almost 3 tasco, almost 3 tons. The bathtub would most likely simply fall through the ceiling of your house. 2 floors down, easy. But that's not what should surprise you. Take a steel anvil, classic blacksmith's one, weighing 100 weight. Place it in this silvery liquid, and the anvil doesn't sink. It rocks on the surface slowly, majestically, like a plastic duckling in a baby's bath. 100 elements of steel rock on the surface. Nonsense. No physics. The density of steel is about 7.5 grams per cubic meter. The density of this liquid is 13.6. Almost twice as heavy. Steel in it is like styrofoam in water. It physically can't sink because the liquid underneath is denser. Even a lead bullet would float. Lead 11.3. Even lighter. To sink something in this substance, you'd need tungsten, gold, platinum, or uranium. Everything else floats. And so you stand in front of this bathtub, lower your hand, your fingers enter the liquid, and you feel an incredible pressure. Not like water, not like oil. It feels like you're plunging your hand into liquid concrete. The resistance is insane. But when you pull your hand out, it's dry. Absolutely. Not a drop on your skin. The liquid didn't wet your skin. It refused to stick to you. Any normal liquid, water, alcohol, gasoline, wets a surface. The molecules cling to your skin, to glass, to fabric. This is a basic property of liquid which we take for granted. Wet means liquid. Liquid means wet. But not here. This substance exists by its own rules. It's liquid, but it doesn't wet. It's a metal, but it's not solid. It's heavier than lead, but it flows like water. This is mercury. Element number 80. Hydrargyrum. Translated from Latin, it means liquid symbol Hz. And now you might think that the mercury is just a curiosity of nature. A funny anomaly for a school textbook. They're like, well, yes, there is such a liquid metal. Interesting, let's move on. But no, mercury is not a curiosity. It is a fundamental part of the periodic table. An element that shouldn't be liquid at all. An element that became liquid because of Albert Einstein. Well, not because of him personally, of course, but because his theory of relativity works not only on the scale of galaxies, but also within a single atom. And that's just the beginning. Because mercury is also the substance that drove a Chinese emperor mad, destroyed an entire Japanese city, and killed a brilliant chemist with 2 drops, without Neri. Right now, as you listen to this, it's circulating in the world's oceans, rising higher and higher up the food chain to your plate. Well, let's take it one step at a time. Let's start with why it's liquid at all, because the answer to that question is one of the most beautiful and terrifying facts in all of chemistry. Open the periodic table. Find element number 79. It's gold. Hard, shiny, melting. Melting at 10 to 64 degrees Celsius. Next to it, on the right, element 81, thallium. Also hard. It melts at 304 degrees Celsius. Between them, number 80, Mercury, melts. Negative 39 degrees Celsius. This means Mercury is liquid, not only at room temperature, but even in the Siberian cold. To make it solid, you need the kind of freezing cold that only Yakut experiences on the harshest January nights. At sub-zero temperatures, Mercury finally solidifies. And you know what? Solid Mercury is an ordinary silvery metal. Malleable, shiny, and unremarkable. You could even cast a hammer from it. It would work until it got hot. And here comes the question that most school teachers avoid. Why? Why does an element sandwiched between two perfectly normal solid metals behave like a liquid? What's wrong with it? The standard answer from the 8th grade textbook goes something like this. Mercury. Mercury has weak interatomic bonds. Thanks, Captain. But why, though? The silence. At most, something vague about the peculiarities of electron configuration. So the real answer has nothing to do with school chemistry. It lies in the realm of relativistic quantum mechanics. And it goes like this. Mercury is liquid because Einstein was right. Follow the thought. Every atom is a nucleus and electrons that revolve around it. Well, precisely, they don't revolve, but exist in the form of probabilistic clouds. But for our conversation, the word revolve is appropriate. So, in light elements like hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, the electrons move relatively slowly, 1,000 kilometers per second, which is a leisurely pace for the quantum world. But the heavier the element, the stronger the nucleus. More protons, stronger attraction. Electrons in inner orbits begin to accelerate. In gold, number 79, the inner electrons are already flying at a speed of about 58% of the speed of light. Upper tutti, number 80, is even faster, about 100,000 kilometers per second. This is 60% of the speed of light, more than half. And this is where special relativity comes into play, the very same one. That E equals mc squared. When an object moves at close to the speed of light, its mass increases. This is not a metaphor. This is a literal physical effect confirmed by thousands of experiments at particle accelerators. An electron traveling at 60% the speed of light becomes noticeably heavier than an electron at rest. And a heavier electron is one that is pressed closer to the nucleus. Its orbit is compressed. What does this mean in practice? The inner electron shells of Mercury literally collapse toward the nucleus, compressing and compacting. And because of this, the outer electrons, the very ones responsible for the chemical bonds between atoms, find themselves in a strange position. They are shielded, enclosed. It is more difficult for them to reach neighboring atoms and form a normal crystal lattice. The result: Mercury atoms do not want to stick together. Bonds between them are so weak that even room temperature is enough to break them. The lattice does not form, and the metal remains liquid. This is not a strange property. It is a direct consequence of the theory of relativity operating at the atomic level. If Einstein were wrong, Mercury would be a solid. Period. Incidentally, that's why gold is yellow. All other metals are silvery because they reflect all wavelengths of the visible spectrum equally. But gold has element 79. The same relativistic effect compresses the inner orbits and changes the energy levels of the electrons so that gold absorbs the blue part of the spectrum and reflects the yellow. Without the theory of relativity, gold would be gray. An ordinary gray piece of iron. Romantic, yes. But let's get back to Mercury. So we figured out why it's liquid. Einstein, electrons at near light speeds, orbital compression, weak inner atomic bonds, beautifully and logically proven. Now for the more serious question. Where did it come from? Where did an element so heavy that an ordinary star couldn't create it come from on Earth? There's a popular myth that all elements heavier than hydrogen and helium were created in the depths of stars. This is true, but only up to a point. Stars, even the most massive, even blue giants the size of Jupiter's orbit, are capable of synthesizing elements only up to iron. Number 26 in the table. Next, stop. Thermonuclear fusion of iron no longer releases energy, but absorbs it. A star that begins producing iron in its core signs its own death warrant. Within seconds, literally seconds, it collapses and explodes as a supernova. And during this explosion, in the shockwave heated to billions of degrees, elements heavier than iron are indeed created: copper, zinc, germanium, ohmium. But this is also important. A supernova explosion is capable of creating elements up to approximately number 4050, zirconium, molybdenum, maybe silver. Beyond that, there isn't enough energy. Artut is number 80. Where did it come from? In 2017, astronomers, for the first time in history, recorded an event that explained everything. The LIGO and Virgo detectors detected gravitational waves from the collision of two neutron stars in the galaxy NGC 1493, 130 million light-years from Earth, 130 million light-years from Earth. The event was designated GW177. Along with the gravitational waves, the telescopes detected a kilonova explosion, not a supernova, a different type. Spectral analysis of this explosion revealed the presence of heavy elements: strontium, lanthanum, and elements of the platinum group and mercury. Here's how it works. A neutron star is what remains of a massive star after a supernova explosion. An object with a diameter of 20 kilometers, but with a mass of 1.5 suns. A teaspoon of neutron star material weighs about 6 billion tons. That's not a typo. 6 billion tons in 1 teaspoon. That's about the weight of Mount Everest. And when two such things collide, which happens as they orbit each other, losing energy to gravitational waves and spiraling closer for millions of years, when they finally meet, something beyond human imagination occurs. The temperature at the point of collision reaches hundreds of billions of degrees. The density is such that neutrons are literally squeezed into the atomic nuclei. The so-called RT process, or rapid neutron capture process, begins. It's the only mechanism known to physics capable of creating the heaviest elements in the periodic table. The concept is simple in formulation and insane in scale. An atomic nucleus captures neutron after neutron, building up its mass faster than it can decay. In a fraction of a second, the nucleus swallows dozens of neutrons, transforming into an increasingly heavier isotope. Then the neutrons inside the nucleus begin to decay, turning into protons. An element changes its number in the periodic table, creeping up from iron to gold, from gold to mercury, from mercury to lead, and so on. This process takes anywhere from milliseconds to several seconds. During this time, tons of gold, platinum, uranium, and mercury are created. Literally tons. The kilonova explosion GW17 is estimated to have ejected approximately 10 Earth masses of heavy elements into space. 10 Earth masses. And all of it scattered across space. Gas-filled clouds enriched with these elements billions of years later became part of new protoplanetary disks from which planets formed, including our own. So every mercury atom that exists on Earth is a relic of a neutron star collision that occurred long before the birth of the sun. Long. That's approximately 5-6 billion years ago. Maybe more. We don't know exactly which collision gave our solar system its supply of heavy elements. Perhaps there were several. But the fact remains, the mercury in your old Soviet thermometer is a fragment of an event that makes a nuclear bomb look like the flick of a lighter. Think about it. You probably smashed a thermometer as a child, played with those silver balls, kicked them around on the floor, and then fused them into one big one. Everyone's done it. And in that moment, you were touching a substance created in the most powerful catastrophe the universe is capable of. Not in a star, not in an explosion, not in the collision of two objects, each essentially a single gigantic atomic nucleus the size of a city. Beautiful, right? And now to people, because people discovered Mercury a very, very long time ago. And the story of this discovery is a story of madness, greed, and death. Mercury in its pure form is almost never found in nature. It is too reactive, too readily reacting with sulfur. Therefore, the main ore of mercury is cinnabar, mercury sulfite HGS. Cinnabar has one property that has predetermined the entire history of this element for millennia to come. It's red, vibrant, rich, blood red, the colors of which are impossible to miss. People discovered cinnabar as far back as neolite 8,000 years ago. The first documented uses are in cave paintings in Spain in the Almudena region. Incidentally, the world's largest cinnabar deposit is located there, which has been continuously mined for over 2,000 years. The Romans used it, the Arabs, the Spanish crown, and mercury was extracted from it right up until the 20th century. But the first to truly become hooked on mercury were the Chinese, not figuratively, but literally. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. The man who built the Great Wall created a unified system of weights and measures, standardized writing, and road widths. One of the most powerful rulers in human history and one of the most paranoid, Qin Shi Huang. Was terrified of death. This isn't a figure of speech. He sent expeditions overseas to search for the islands of immortals. He executed his confidants on the slightest suspicion of conspiracy. And he drank mercury regularly, on the advice of court alchemists who convinced him that mercury was the essence of eternal life. A metal that doesn't rust, doesn't deteriorate, doesn't age, so whoever drinks it won't age either. The logic, of course, is ironclad, unless you know that mercury is a neurotoxin. Symptoms of chronic mercury poisoning include irritability, outbursts of anger, paranoia, insomnia, tremors, impaired coordination, confusion, and hallucinations. If you read the chronicles of the final years of Peng Shi Huangzi's reign, you'll see a classic clinical picture of mercury poisoning. The emperor became unpredictably cruel. He ordered the burning of all books except those he personally approved. He buried 460 scholars alive, who, in his opinion, were spreading false knowledge. His behavior became increasingly erratic and irrational. He died in 210 BC. He was 49 years old. The official cause of death is unknown, but considering that he drank a mercury solution for years, the reason is pretty obvious. And here's where the fun begins. His tomb is the Qin Huang Mausoleum, the one with the terracotta army. 8,000 life-size clay soldiers, that's just the antechambers. The tomb itself, a vast underground palace, remains unopened. The Chinese authorities prohibit excavations. Officially, because there is no technology to preserve the contents, but there is another reason. The ancient historian Simon Xia, who lived a century after the emperor's death, described the interior of the tomb as follows. On the ceiling is a map of the starry sky inlaid with pearls. On the floor is a relief map of the empire. And rivers flow across this map. Rivers of pure mercury. The yellow river of Izao, recreated by liquid metal. For a long time, this was considered a beautiful legend. Until in 2002, Chinese scientists conducted a geochemical analysis of the soil above the tomb. The result, mercury vapor concentrations above the mound are hundreds of times higher than normal levels. The distribution is uneven. The peaks occur in areas that correspond to the locations of rivers on ancient maps of China. Samaxia wasn't lying. Mercury rivers are real. They've been flowing there for 2,200 years. In complete darkness, in a sealed underground chamber, beneath a layer of earth and clay. Thousands of tons of liquid metal, created in the collision of neutron stars, recreate the geography of the ancient empire beneath the feet of modern tourists. Qin Shi Huangdi wasn't alone. Dozens of Chinese emperors after him drank mercury. The Davos alchemists made a pill of immortality, then from it mixing mercury sulfur with gold and lead. Several Tang Dynasty emperors died from poisoning from these pills. Taizong, Xianzong, Muzong, Wuzong. 4 emperors of the same dynasty killed by the same medicine. And each time the court alchemists found an explanation. The child's temperament took the wrong dose, or the stars were out of alignment, or he didn't meditate enough before taking it. This isn't ancient. It's a pattern that repeats itself over and over again in human history. We find a beautiful, sparkling, unusual substance, ascribe magical properties to it, begin ingesting it, die, and instead of drawing a conclusion, pass on the recipe to the next generation. But China is only the beginning. Mercury has found its way into every civilization on the planet. The Greeks used cinnabar as a dye, the Romans as a cosmetic. Wealthy Roman women whitened their faces with lead white and tinted their cheeks with cinnabar. Beautiful. Deadly. But Europe was still a long way from the mercury madness. The real horror began when they learned to use mercury for gold mining. Mercury has a property that has determined the fate of empires, economies, and millions of people for centuries. It dissolves gold without melting it or corroding it with acid. It dissolves it, just like water dissolves sugar. The process is called amalgamation. You take a piece of gold, a ring, a nugget, or gold dust, and dip it in mercury. The gold begins to disappear, slowly but inexorably. Gold atoms leave the crystal lattice and insert themselves between mercury atoms, forming an amalgam, a liquid alloy. The silvery liquid becomes slightly thicker, slightly heavier, but its appearance remains virtually unchanged. Within a few hours, your ring simply ceases to exist as a separate object. It is now part of the mercury. Then the amalgam is heated. The mercury evaporates at 3. This is low for a metal. The vapors evaporate, leaving pure gold at the bottom, concentrated, collected from the smallest grains that would otherwise be impossible to extract. This method was already known to the Romans. In the 1st century AD, Pliny the Elder described amalgamation in his natural history. But truly large-scale use came after the discovery of America. When the Spanish reached the silver and gold mines of Mexico and Peru, they faced a problem. The ore was poor. Gold and silver were contained in the rock in the form of tiny inclusions. Smelting them directly was inefficient. And then, in 1554, the Spanish mining engineer Bartolomeo de Medina invented the patio process. The patio process. Crushed ore was mixed with mercury, salt, and copper sulfate on large stone patio platforms. The Mulechniks themselves walked through this mixture, stirring it with their hooves. The mercury drew precious metals from the rock. The amalgam was then collected, heated, and pure silver or gold was obtained. This was a revolution. The Spanish Empire became the richest power in the world. Silver from the Potas and gold from Mexico flowed to Madrid. This money was used to build armadas, wage wars, and finance the Counter-Reformation. The silver real became a global currency. Mercury was at a premium. Thousands upon thousands of tons of mercury. Spain imported mercury from Almaden, the very same deposit in Spain, and shipped it to the New World. During the 3 centuries of colonial rule, an estimated 100,000 to 150,000 tons of mercury were used in Latin American mines. Most of it simply evaporated into the atmosphere when the amalgam was heated. Some went into the river. Some settled in the soil. The workers in the mines, mostly impoverished indigenous peoples, breathed in mercury vapor every day. The average life expectancy of Potosi miners was several years. Not decades, but years. Their teeth loosened and fell out. Their hands shook. They lost their minds. Spanish chroniclers described this with horror and continued to send new people into the mines. Potosi, a city at an altitude of 4,000 meters in modern-day Bolivia. In the 10th century is one of the largest cities in the world. Population up to 200,000. Richer than London. Richer than Paris. The saying, vale un Potosi, is worth Potosi, meant unimaginable wealth. Historians estimate that over 3 centuries, about 60,000 of silver were mined from Herrera Rica in Potosi, and for this about 30,000 tons of mercury were used. And now, a leap 400 years later, Amazon, Brazil, 21st century. Illegal gold miners, the garimperos. The method is the same, absolutely the same. Mercury is poured into pans mixed with river sand, and the gold grains are extracted. Then the amalgam is burned over a fire, often right next to homes. without masks, without ventilation. Mercury vapor rises into the air and settles in the lungs. According to the UN, about 2,000 tons of mercury are used annually for artisanal gold mining worldwide. 2,000 tons per year. This is the largest source of mercury pollution on the planet. Larger than all coal-fired power plants combined. The rivers of the Amazon, Congo, and Southeast Asia are poisoned. The fish in them contain mercury in concentrations many times higher than the norms. The indigenous peoples who eat this fish are poisoned. Children in villages along the Amazon rivers are experiencing blood mercury levels that cause irreversible brain damage. We're destroying one metal to obtain another. Gold. But it isn't needed for anything vital. 90% of mined gold sits in bank vaults or hangs around people's necks. It glitters beautifully. That's its primary function. And for that glitter, we flood the rivers from which people drink with mercury. Paradoxically, both these metals, gold and mercury, are born in the same process, the collision of neutron stars. They're brothers, and we use one to extract the other with the side effect of poisoning the biosphere. But this is all on an industrial scale. Thousands, sometimes millions of people at abstraction. Let's narrow the focus to one person, 2 drops, and 10 months of slow-motion horror. Aaron Wetterhahn, professor of chemistry at Dartmouth College, is one of the world's leading experts on heavy metal toxicology. The irony is chilling. A person who professionally studied how heavy metals kill cells was killed by heavy metal. August 14, 1996, laboratory. Wetterhahn was working with dimethyl mercury. It's an organic mercury compound, formula CH32Ag. It's a clear, almost odorless liquid. It has a slight sweet taste in the air, but to feel it, you'd have to inhale a lethal dose. Dimethyl mercury is not the same mercury found in thermometers. Metallic mercury, elemental mercury, Hg0, is relatively low in toxicity in short-term skin contact. Yes, pores are dangerous. Yes, chronic poisoning kills. But if you once touched a drop of mercury from a broken thermometer with your bare hands, don't panic. You probably won't die. Dimethyl mercury is a different matter. This is possibly the most dangerous chemical compound humans have to work with. Wetterhahn knew this. He was working with gloves. Latex gloves. Standard chemistry lab protection. She used a fume hood. She followed protocol. And she dropped a drop. Maybe 2. The exact amount is unknown. A few drops of dimethyl mercury landed on the back of her left hand, on her glove. She wiped them away and continued working. Here's what she didn't know, and what no one before her knew. Dimethyl mercury penetrates latex in 15 seconds, not minutes, seconds. The CH32Hg molecules are so small and so lipophilic, meaning they love fat, that they pierce the latex membrane like a bullet pierces paper. The glove wasn't protection. It was an illusion of protection. The dimethyl mercury was absorbed through the skin, entered the bloodstream, and began its journey. In the body, dimethyl mercury is converted to methylmercury CH3G+. This is an ion that has a tremendous affinity for the thiol groups of proteins. Thiol groups are sulfur-containing molecular fragments. They are present in virtually every enzyme in your body. Methylmercury binds to them and systematically disables the enzymes, one by one. But the main target is the brain. Methylmercury easily crosses the blood-brain barrier. This protective wall of cells promalisnics the brain for most toxins in the blood. Lead, for example, barely passes through it in adults. Methylmercury passes freely. It literally tricks the barrier's transport systems, disguising itself as the amino acid methionine. Once in the brain, methylmercury binds to neural proteins, disrupts the function of mitochondria, the cellular energy plants, causes oxidative stress, and neurons begin to die. With 3 months, Kiran Wetterhahn didn't notice a single symptom. Mercury was accumulating in her brain quietly, unnoticed, like a ticking time bomb. In January 1997, 5 months after the incident, she noticed her speech had become slightly slurred. She was unsteady when she walked, and her fingers and toes were slightly numb. She went to the doctor. A blood test showed mercury levels of 4,000 micrograms per liter. The norm is 1 to 8, 4,000, 500 times higher. Then, quickly and irreversibly, February, she stopped recognizing her colleagues. She couldn't eat on her own. Vision lapses, first peripheral, then central. Hearing loss. March, coma. She died on June 5, 1997, 10 months after 2 drops of liquid landed on her glove. An autopsy revealed the extent of the destruction. The cerebellum was destroyed. The visual cortex was destroyed. The brain volume was reduced. Neurons were literally burned out. The brain, which had spent years studying the mechanisms of heavy metal toxicity, was killed by a heavy metal. After Veteran's death, regulations for working with dimethylmercury were revised worldwide. Latex gloves were deemed unsuitable. Now the standard is double gloves, not trill on the inside, not Oprine on the outside, plus a full protective suit, plus a face shield. And still most labs simply prefer not to work with this substance. 2 drops, 15 seconds, 10 months. One of the world's best chemists. And you know what's most frightening? Dimethylmercury isn't some exotic substance. It forms naturally. Bacteria in the bottom sediments of reservoirs convert inorganic mercury into methylmercury, and some of the methylmercury is abiotically converted to dimethylmercury. This is a natural process. It occurs in every polluted body of water on the planet. But methylmercury, single CH3Hg+, is dangerous even without converting to the dimethyl form. It accumulates in fish. It is this form that caused the worst mercury-related environmental disaster. But we'll get to that a little later. First, hatters. This English expression existed long before Lewis Carroll. Alice in Wonderland was published in 1865. The hatter in the book is a character who behaves absurdly, illogically, chaotically. Mad tea parties, idle chatter, meaningless riddles. Carroll didn't invent this image. He copied it from reality. In the 15th, 9th centuries in England and France, felt hats were the main men's headwear. Top hats, boulevards, cocked hats, everything was made of felt. And felt was made from rabbit, beaver, and hare fur. And the nitrator 2-THG, in parentheses NO, parentheses 2, was used to treat the fur. The process was called corotine, or keratin, because the fur acquired an orange tint after treatment. Mercury nitrator treated the fibers, roughening them, allowing them to adhere better to each other during felting. Without mercury, the felt was loose and quickly lost its shape. With mercury, it was dense, smooth, and durable. Hatters worked with the mercury nitrator solution with their bare hands, inhaled the fumes from the dried fur, ate in the workshop, and lived in the workshop for years, even decades. The result was called erethism. Mercurial erethism. Symptoms: tremors, hatters, tremors, shays. First the fingers, then the arms, then the head. The person couldn't hold a cup. Then mental symptoms: pathological shyness interspersed with outbursts of rage, depression, hallucinations, memory loss, speech impairment, and finally, dementia. Hatter's workshops were hell. A modern description paints a picture from a horror film. Old masters with shaking hands and empty eyes, muttering incoherently. Young apprentices who, after 5 to 10 years, became the same. In Denbury, Connecticut, the center of hat production in the United States, such a high percentage of the population suffered from tremors and mental disorders that it became part of the local identity. Danbury shakes was a common term, and no one did anything about it. It wasn't until 1941, After the United States entered World War II, that the use of mercury in hat-making was banned, and not out of concern for the workers' health. Mercury was simply needed for the war industry, for detonators. Mercury fulminate, Hg in parentheses, O and C in parentheses, dollars as palming agent in caps is in caps. For 3 centuries, men wore hats soaked in mercury, and those who made these hats slowly went mad. And this was considered a professional trade, not poisoning. Well, hatters, they're all a bit eccentric. So they said, so they thought. No one thought to connect the master's madness with a substance they worked with every day. But then again, hats are a small thing. Mercury was everywhere. Calomel, mercuric chloride, Hg2Cl2, was used as a laxative. Yes, a laxative. Doctors prescribed it to patients for constipation, poor blood flow, fever, and basically for any reason. George Washington, according to some sources, took calomel. Napoleon Bonaparte took calomel on St. Helena. Half the armies of the 10th century were treated with calomel. Corrosive sublimate medium chloride, HgCl2, was used as an antiseptic. It was used to disinfect wounds, clean instruments, and treat operating tables. Yes, it killed bacteria. It killed all living things. Mercuriamide chloride was used in cosmetics for skin whitening. Mercury-based ointments were rubbed into the face for years. The result was pale skin, because mercury suppressed melanin synthesis, and kidney damage, because mercury was absorbed through the skin and deposited in internal organs. And a separate issue is the treatment of syphilis. From the 20th century onward, mercury was the main treatment for the French disease. Patients were placed in sealed barrels and fumigated with mercury vapor, or rubbed with mercury ointments, or given a solution of corrosive sublimate to drink. A saying of the time, one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Venus is the goddess of love. Mercury is the Latin name for Mercury, and the god trickster, which is symbolic. Did this help against syphilis? Partly yes. Mercury really did suppress treponema, the causative agent of syphilis. But patients often died not from the disease, but from the treatment. A classic paradox before antibiotic medicine. For centuries, we voluntarily introduced mercury into our bodies, into our mouths, onto our skin, into our lungs. We wore it on our heads, smeared it on our faces, gave it to children. And when people went crazy, shook, lost their teeth and sanity, we attributed it to divine punishment, bad character, or professional deformation. This is not ignorance, it is systemic blindness. For centuries, humanity could not see the connection between the silvery metal and mass insanity. Because mercury does not kill immediately, it kills slowly, over months, years, unnoticed. Neuron by neuron, neuron by neuron. And when we finally saw this connection, it was too late for the entire city. Minomata is a small city on the west coast of Kyushu, Japan. Population around 50,000 in the 1950s. A quiet, provincial fishing town. Minamata Bay, clean water, rich in fish. People lived by fishing for centuries. In 1932, a chemical plant belonging to the Jiso Corporation opened in the town. It produced acetaldehyde, a raw material for plastics. The catalyst for the process was mercury, not organic mercury, but mercury sulfate, to be precise. And the mercury-containing waste was dumped into the bay. For 20 years, from 1932 to 1952, the mercury simply poured into the water. No one measured it, no one checked it. It was waste. It was supposed to be dumped into the sea. The sea is big, it will dissolve. The first signs appeared in the early 1950s. Cats, fishing cats, the ones that fed on ruba from the docks, began to behave strangely. Their gait became unsteady. They staggered, bumped into walls, fell. Then convulsions and spasms began. The cats thrashed, spun around, and sometimes threw themselves into the sea. Fishermen called it dancing cat disease. Then people started getting sick. On April 21st, 1956, a 5-year-old girl named Kumamoto Tatsuko was taken to the hospital at the Cheso plant with symptoms of severe neurological damage. She couldn't walk, couldn't speak, and was having convulsions. A few days later, her sister was admitted to the same hospital with identical symptoms. Then, neighbors. On May 1st, 1956, the hospital's chief physician, Dr. Hajime Hasakawa, officially notified city authorities of an outbreak of an unknown neurological disease. This date is considered the official start of Minomata disease. Symptoms include narrowing of the visual field. Patients see only what's directly in front of them, as if through a tube. Impaired coordination, ataxia, hearing loss, speech impairment, dysarthria, and at least limb loss, convulsions. In severe cases, insanity, paralysis, coma, and death. The disease primarily affected the fishermen and their families, those who ate fish from the bay every day. The cause was quickly identified: mercury. Researchers from Kumamoto University already suspected the Chiso plant was to blame in 1956, but here comes the most disgusting part of the story. Chiso did everything possible to cover it up. The Bultimat hired its own experts, who published alternative theories. The contamination was caused by ammunition dumped in the bay during the war. Or was it an infectious disease? Or the result of the fishermen's unsanitary living conditions? Anything but mercury from our pipes. Dr. Hasakawa, who worked at the Chiso plant, conducted an experiment. He fed cats fish caught in the plant's wastewater. The cats developed Minomata disease. Classic symptoms. Ironclad proof. Hasakawa reported to management. He was ordered to stop the experiments and remain silent. He obeyed. For 12 years, from 1956 until 1968, the plant continued dumping mercury into the bay. 12 years after the cause was identified, acetaldehyde production was stopped only in 1968, not because of illness. The technology was simply outdated. The plant switched to a different process. By then, the statistics were staggering. More than 2,200 cases of Minomata disease were officially recognized. Of these, almost 200 deaths occurred in the first few years alone. The real figures are likely significantly higher. Many patients never sought medical attention or were not recognized as victims due to bureaucratic barriers. And one more detail that makes your blood run cold. Genital Minomata disease. Methylmercury penetrates the placental barrier. Mothers who ate contaminated fish gave birth to children with severe nervous system damage. Children who had never tasted mercury-containing fish were poisoned in the womb. Photographer Eugene Smith and his wife Eileen documented the lives of Minomata victims in the early 1970s. Their most famous photograph, Tomoka bathing, became a symbol of the environmental movement. A mother holds her daughter, Tomoka Uemura, born with Minomata congenital disease, in the bathtub. Twisted limbs, blind eyes, a motionless body, a beauty and horror in a single frame. A mother who bathes her child every day, knowing that he will never be able to walk, talk, or see. For publishing these photographs, Eugene Smith was beaten by Chiso thugs. His spine and one eye were damaged. He continued to photograph. Minomata is more than just an environmental disaster. It is a textbook example of how corporate evil works. The company knew. The authorities knew. The doctors knew. Everyone knew. And did nothing for 12 years because the plant provided jobs. Because mercury cannot be detected in the water, because the victims were poor fishermen, not shareholders. The lawsuits against Chiso dragged on for decades. The last compensation was paid only in 2010, more than 50 million after the disaster began. But here's what's really important to understand. Minomata isn't a closed chapter. It's an ongoing process. The mercury that entered the bay didn't go away. It settled in the bottom sediments. Bacteria in these sediments continue to convert inorganic mercury into methyl mercury, the organic mercury that easily penetrates the body. Methylmercury accumulates in plankton. Small fish eat plankton. and the concentration increases. Large fish eat small fish, and the concentration increases even more. Tuna eat large fish, and the concentration skyrockets. This process is called biomagnification. At each level of the food chain, the mercury concentration increases by 10 to 15 times. Plankton? Plankton is roughly 1 unit. Small fish are 10. Medium-sized fish are 100. Tuna are 1,000, and dolphins or sharks are 10,000. And this isn't just happening in Minamata Bay. It's happening in every ocean on the planet, globally. According to the United Nations Environment Program, mercury concentrations in the upper layers of the world's oceans have increased roughly threefold over the past 100 years. The main sources are emissions from coal-fired power plants, artisanal gold mining, and industrial waste. Mercury enters the atmosphere, is carried by winds, and falls with precipitation into the ocean. Bacteria convert it into methyl mercury. Methyl mercury rises up the food chain and ends up in tuna. The very tuna that sits in a can on your supermarket shelf. Recommends that pregnant women limit their tuna consumption and avoid certain types of fish altogether. Swordfish, kingfish, and shark. Because mercury levels in these species consistently exceed safe limits. Just think about it. We have to warn pregnant women not to eat certain types of fish. In the 20th century, it wasn't because of bacteria, not because of parasites, but because of mercury. Because of the metal we dump into the ocean ourselves. Mercury doesn't decompose, it doesn't decay, it has no half-life in the chemical sense. Stable isotopes of mercury exist forever. It simply cycles from the atmosphere to the ocean, from the ocean to plankton, from plankton to fish, from fish to you, from you back to the soil, from the soil to the atmosphere. An endless cycle. The Minamata Convention, an international treaty signed in 2013 and entered into force in 2017, obliges member countries to reduce their mercury use. The production of mercury thermometers, mercury lamps, and mercury batteries is banned. Mercury emissions from power plants are limited. The goal is to completely stop artisanal gold mining using mercury. This is good, but the mercury that's already in the ocean, thousands of tons, isn't going anywhere. It will circulate for centuries, millennia. It's already there, in the plankton, in the fish, in the tuna, in you, and the convention is named after the Minamata to remember, so that the 5-year-old girl who couldn't walk or talk wouldn't be forgotten for the sake of convenience. Mercury, hydrar, liquid silver, element number 80. Let's put it all together. It was born in the collision of neutron stars in the most energetic event in the universe since the Big Bang. It's liquid because its electrons move fast enough to trigger Einstein's theory of relativity at the subatomic level. It's so dense that a steel anvil floats on its surface. People discovered it thousands of years ago and decided it was the elixir of immortality. Emperors drank it and died in madness. Alchemists heated it, mixed it with sulfur and gold, searching for the philosopher's stone. Hatters inhaled its vapors and transformed into characters from nightmares. Doctors prescribed it for every ailment, creating new ones. Gold miners flooded rivers with it. Factories flooded seas with it. Two key properties have defined the entire history of mercury in human civilization. First, it is beautiful, hypnotically and terrifyingly beautiful. The silvery sheen, this fluidity, this ability to disintegrate into perfect spherical drops and then merge again. No other element behaves like this. Mercury is mesmerizing. It is like a mirror that has become liquid. The ancients rightly considered it magical. Second, it is invisible like a poison. Metallic mercury is odorless. Mercury vapor is colorless. Methyl mercury in fish cannot be tasted. Mercury poisoning develops over months. Symptoms in the early stages are nonspecific. Irritability, fatigue, headache. Who would go to a toxicologist for a headache? No one. Mercury kills quietly, patiently, 1 neuron at a time. It is this combination, its beauty and stealth, that makes Mercury the perfect metaphor for everything humanity cannot control. We think we control the elements. We build nuclear reactors, synthesize transuranic elements, send robots to Mars. We are the pinnacle of creation, conquerors of nature, masters of the planet. Mercury lies buried in the sediments of the Pacific Ocean. Bacteria slowly convert it into methylmercury. Fish concentrate it. Tuna accumulates it. And a chef at an expensive restaurant in Tokyo or New York slices this tuna into thin slices and arranges it beautifully on a plate. We don't control mercury. We can't even remove it from the ocean. We don't have the technology to do so. Not even the theoretical approach. The mercury we've dumped over a century of industrial activity is an irreversible fact. Like CO2 in the atmosphere, like plastic in the Mariana Trench, we can stop adding it, but we can't remove what's already there. And here's another fact that's rarely mentioned. Permafrost. Enormous reserves of mercury are frozen in the Arctic permafrost of Siberia, Alaska, and Canada. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that Arctic permafrost contains approximately 1,656,000 tons of mercury. This is twice the amount of mercury in all other soils, oceans, and the atmosphere on the planet combined. Permafrost is melting, and the climate is changing. Temperatures in the Arctic are rising 2 to 4 times faster than the global average. When permafrost melts, the organic matter trapped within it begins to decompose, metacompose, and mercury, securely sealed in frozen soil for millennia, is released, entering rivers, then the Arctic Ocean, then the Arctic ecosystems, seals, walruses, polar bears, and the indigenous peoples who feed on the... This isn't a disaster movie scenario. It's already happening. Mercury levels in Arctic animals are rising. Inna peoples who live a traditional way of life have been found to have elevated mercury levels in the blood of pregnant women and children. 500,000 tons of mercury trapped in frozen ground. A time bomb activated by climate. Do you know what's most elegant about this story? Mercury is a mirror. Literally. Mercury was used to make mirrors from the 15th to the 10th centuries. Silvering mirrors was actually mercury coating. A thin layer of tin mercury amalgam was applied to the glass surface. The mirror makers of Venice, the masters of the island of Murano, were famous throughout Europe and died of mercury poisoning, like hatters. Mercury is a mirror. And if you look into this mirror carefully, you won't see yourself, you'll see the history of humanity. A history in which again and again we find something beautiful, dangerous, and incomprehensible. And instead of retreating, we reach out. The Varus Emperor of China drank mercury to live forever. Hatters breathed mercury to make beautiful hats. Gold miners breathed mercury in the river to mine gold. Factories dumped mercury into the sea to make plastic, and each time someone paid. The emperor to reason, the hatters to reason, children to mortars, their whole lives. Mercury is not evil. It has no intentions. It is element number 80. 80 protons, 121 neutrons in the most common isotope. It obeys the laws of quantum mechanics and thermodynamics. It doesn't want to poison you. It simply exists. But here's the paradox. A substance with no intention whatsoever has killed more people than many deliberately created poisons. Because its beauty is deceptive. Because its venom is invisible. Because we are creatures who evolved to fear tigers and snakes, not the colorless pores and invisible ions in fish. Our biology is not adapted to dangers that cannot be seen, heard, or smelled. We don't sense radiation. We don't sense carbon monoxide. We don't sense methylmercury. Evolution did not prepare us for enemies that kill a neuron on a day. And that's the real horror. Not that mercury is dangerous, but that we are blind to its danger. Biologically blind. And the only tools we have against this blindness are science, chemistry, toxicology, and ecology. The very same disciplines that long painfully, through corpses and catastrophes, gathered knowledge about what this silvery liquid does to our bodies. Erin Wetahan knew all about Mercury's toxicity. She dedicated her life to it, and she died from 2 drops, because knowledge is a necessary, but not sufficient condition for survival. Mercury is older than the Earth. It was created before our planet existed. It will exist long after we are gone. Every atom of mercury currently circulating in the world's oceans, in the Arctic permafrost, in the sediments of Minamata Bay, in the tuna on your plate, every one of these atoms has survived the birth and death of stars, the formation of planets, the emergence and degenerations and extinction of dinosaurs, the rise and fall of empires. It will outlive us too. Mercury is the devil's mirror, not because it is evil, but because it is honest. It shows us exactly what we are: smart, curious, greedy primates who stick their hands into things they don't understand and are surprised when those things kill them. The universe doesn't have to be safe. It doesn't have to be understandable. It simply obeys the laws of physics. And the laws of physics don't care how many neurons you have or how tightly you cling to life. 80 protons, liquid silver, a mirror without a reflection. Mercury was here before us. It will remain after. And the only thing we can do is look into this mirror and try not to repeat the mistakes of those who looked into it before us. But history shows that we always repeat. Bye.